Before dawn breaks over the great city of Tenochtitlan, I rise. I am a priest, a servant to gods who demand blood, fire, and silence. Every day I walk the razor's edge between this world and the next, painting my face with ash and insects, and whispering prayers that bind the sun to rise again. Tonight, you will walk with me through the shadows of the great temple, witness the sacrifices, the sacred rites, and the weight of a destiny that is written in blood. This is my story. This is my burden. Welcome to the day in the life of an Aztec priest. The dawn of the fifth sun, Tenochtitlan, 1487, the great city of the Aztec Empire, the jewel of the Valley of Mexico. At dawn, I climb the temple steps barefoot, the stones still wet with last night's rain or blood. I feel every chill as the rough surface presses beneath my soles, slick and uneven. Each step carries the weight of the sacred. This ascent is more than a journey upward. It is a passage between worlds, a bridge from the mortal realm to the divine. The sky ahead burns a fierce red, bleeding into the horizon like a promise, whispered by the gods themselves. That red, deep, vivid, and alive, is a good omen. It speaks of fire, life, and renewal. It is the color of sacrifice, but also of the dawn that follows the night's darkest hour. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and lingering smoke from last night's offerings. Somewhere below, the city of Tenochtitlan stirs, its heartbeat, slow but certain. The scent of copal incense drifts upward, curling around the temple stones like invisible serpents, carrying prayers to the heavens. The mist from the lake beyond clings to the air, softening the edges of the towering pyramids and sprawling causeways, but not dulling the sharp clarity of this moment. With each footfall, my body remembers the countless rituals performed here. The chants, the sacrifices, the unending dance between human and God. I am the priest, the mediator, the guardian of this sacred rhythm. The temple's stones have soaked in the sweat and blood of generations. They whisper secrets only the initiated hear. This wetness beneath my feet reminds me, we are bound to these gods by more than faith. We are bound by sacrifice, by duty, by the cycle of life and death that sustains the world. Above, the red sky deepens, streaked with the first tentative rays of sunlight. The horizon glows like molten jade and gold, the promise of a new day forged in fire. I pause at the summit, hands resting on the cold stone altar, feeling the heartbeat of the earth beneath me. The blood spilled last night still stains these stones, a vivid reminder of the offering made to Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli, to Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca. Each drop a plea for rain, for victory, for balance. The gods demand no less. From here, the city spreads below like a living tapestry. The thatched rooftops and bustling markets, the grand palaces of the nobles, the shimmering canals reflecting the sky's fiery hues, all are connected to this sacred place by invisible threads of power and belief. My gaze lingers on the people, waking in their homes, preparing maize for breakfast, weaving feathers into garments, sharpening obsidian blades for the hunt or the battlefield. Their lives flow in rhythm with the temple's pulse. Their prayers, their labors, their very breath feed the cycle I guard. The temple is already alive with movement. Fellow priests begin the morning rites, their voices rising in chanting that threads through the air like woven silk. Drums begin their deep, steady beat, calling the gods' attention. I join them, the sound resonating through my chest and soul, a reminder that I am both servant and vessel, a conduit for divine will. Morning air carries the sharp scent of freshly cut flowers, offerings waiting to be placed at altars below. I feel the weight of my ritual cloak on my shoulders, embroidered with symbols of serpents and eagles, the emblems of power and wisdom. The cold air nips at my exposed skin, but the fire within me burns steady and fierce. Each breath I draw is prayer, each movement an act of devotion. As the sun begins to rise higher, painting the sky with gold and amber, I prepare for the next act in the eternal drama of life and death. The chosen one lies ready, a warrior captured in battle, honored in this moment to give his life so the sun may continue its journey across the sky. I steady my hand, feel the obsidian blade's razor edge, and begin the sacred rite. The blood flows, warm and vital, seeping into the stone, mingling with the memory of those who came before. The people below remain silent, eyes raised, hearts aligned with the rhythm of the cosmos. The offering is accepted. The gods are appeased. The red sky fades to brilliant light, and the world, for a moment, is right again. I descend the steps slowly, feet still wet, heart steady. The day has begun. The Offering, 1487, Tenochtitlan, the Aztec Empire. The sky above burns a furious red, bleeding like an open wound into the horizon. It is a good omen, my elders say, a sign that the gods hunger and the world must be fed. Before me lies the altar, its surface slick and stained. A prisoner is dragged forward, bound but calm. His skin is pale against the dark stone, muscles tense but unmoving. The crowd's silence is heavier than the humid dawn air. They wait, watching me, waiting for the moment I become the hand of the gods. The prisoner's eyes lock onto mine. No fear, no pleading, only a dark, simmering calm, a fire beneath cold skin. His lips part in a whisper barely audible, but the name he speaks pierces the quiet like a blade, Tezcatlipoca. I freeze. The god of the night winds, of obsidian mirrors and sorcery, whose name is rarely spoken aloud, even in the temple. To utter it is to invite his shadow into the heart of the world. The priest before me warned, do not name him or you risk losing yourself. But the prisoner's eyes bore into mine, unflinching. He says it again, softer, a ghost's breath. On stone, Tezcatlipoca. The crowd stirs, an undercurrent of tension thickening the morning air. The drummers begin a slow, grinding beat that vibrates through my bones. The smoke from copal incense curls upward, mixing with the sharp tang of blood and sweat. I can smell the prisoner's fear, not on his skin, but in the tremble beneath his stillness. He is calm now, but I know the terror lies beneath, buried deep. I lift the obsidian blade, its edge glinting black as night. My hand trembles, but the gods demand. This offering, I press the tip to the prisoner's chest, cold, hard skin yielding to the razor's kiss. Blood blossoms, thick and warm, spilling over the stone like a dark river. The scent is overwhelming, metallic, raw, alive. His gaze never wavers. The name echoes in my mind again, relentless. Tezcatlipoca. A shudder ripples through me, like a chill running down a spine that should be dead. The knife cuts deeper, slicing through muscle, heart exposed to the dawn's blood-red light. He gasps once, a ragged sound. Not pain, but something older, deeper. As his life spills out, I see his final breath curling into the air, twisting with the smoke, rising to the sky like a prayer or a curse. The gods will feast today. I watch as his blood drips, pooling and seeping into the ancient stone, a grim sacrament binding mortal to divine. Around me the crowd exhales as one, a shudder passing through their ranks, relief, fear, awe, all tangled into one. The sky bleeds brighter now, a roaring furnace of red and gold. The air thrums with power. The offering is made, the pact renewed. The gods are sated, for now, but in the silence that follows I cannot shake the whispered name from my mind. Tezcatlipoca, the god who watches from the shadows, the god who waits. And I wonder if the blood on my hands will ever wash clean. The Marking, 1487. The great city of the Aztec Empire. I sit alone in the shadowed chamber beneath the temple's heart, the air thick with smoke and the sharp scent of crushed earth. My fingers tremble as I grind the brittle. Shells of insects into powder, cracked carapaces, dried wings, legs broken off like brittle twigs. The ash from last night's sacred fire drifts between my hands like smoke caught in the palms of the dead. Then the obsidian shards ground to a fine dust that glints like black stars in the dim light. I mix them all together, the gritty slurry, thick and bitter, the scent metallic and sharp, smelling of decay and power. Each grain of ash, every fleck of obsidian, every crushed insect shell is soaked with meaning. Every line I draw on my face binds me to the gods, and the demons lurking beyond their gaze. The first stroke slices across my cheek, rough, jagged, burning like fire on skin already raw from fasting and prayer. It is a prayer for protection, yes, but also a curse, a ward against enemies, visible and invisible. The paint dries quickly, a second skin, black as a crow's wing, matte and unyielding. I trace the next line over my forehead, a sharp strike like a blade. It is the call to the night spirits, those who whisper in obsidian mirrors and watch from the cracks between worlds. My breath catches. With every stroke I feel their gaze, cold and penetrating, seeping into my bones. The pain is slow and deep, not from the paint itself, but from the weight of what it means. I'm no longer just a priestess. I'm a vessel, a beacon, a living sacrifice of flesh and spirit. The lines crawl over my face, jagged like lightning scars, ancient symbols scrawled in pain and blood. Each mark is a prayer to Huitzilopochtli for strength to endure the coming day, but also a curse to those who would dare cross me. They say, the paint holds power, that it binds the soul, that it is a bridge between life and death. I feel it burning beneath my skin, as if the gods themselves have etched their wrath onto my flesh. The final stroke crosses my lips, sealing the spell. I taste dust and ash, bitter and sharp. My reflection in the obsidian mirror stares back at me, a warrior painted in shadows, a priestess cloaked in silence and fire. I am marked, blessed, cursed, and when I step into the light of the rising sun, the world will know. This face is not to be crossed. The paint will hold, or it will consume me. Dreams of jaguars and fire. 1487, Tenochtitlan, the Aztec Empire. At night, when the world falls silent and the flickering torchlight fades to shadows, I close my eyes and the visions come. Jaguars, majestic and terrible, walk through fire. Their black fur gleams like polished obsidian, eyes glowing like molten gold. They move with a grace that defies the chaos of the flames, undeterred by the scorching heat licking at their pores. The fire swirls around them in waves of red and orange, crackling with an ancient, wild voice. I hear it in my dream, the roar of flames and the fierce growl of the jaguars, a sound that echoes from deep within the earth, from the blood and bones of those who came before me. The scent of smoke fills my nostrils, thick and choking, sweet like burning resin, bitter like the ash that falls from the sky. Their eyes meet mine. They stare through the veil of sleep and see the weight I carry, the burdens of the temple, the prayers that hang heavy on my tongue, the secrets I dare not speak aloud. The jaguars do not flinch, do not falter. They are firewalkers, eternal and unstoppable, embodying the fierce spirit of the gods who demand both reverence and sacrifice. Then, abruptly, I wake. The world is dark but for the faint glow from the temple hearth. I move with careful steps, bare feet pressing against the cold stone floor, still damp with the night's mist. The coals in the fire pit are warm beneath my touch, glowing faintly like embers waiting to burst into flame once more. I feel the heat in my palms, a reminder that the fire has not died. It is alive just as the jaguars were alive in my dream. The fire is a pulse beneath the stone, a sacred heart beating slowly, waiting for my command. I kneel beside the hearth, letting the warmth seep into my skin, the smoke curling around my face, filling my lungs with its smoky embrace. The scent is both comfort and warning. The fire that sustains us can just as easily consume us. I trace the outlines of the coals with my fingers, feeling the rough texture of ash and stone beneath my touch. It is a ritual I perform countless times, a silent prayer to the gods who speak through flame and shadow. The fire is both messenger and judge, reflecting my own soul's flicker between light and darkness. Outside, the jungle breathes, alive with the sounds of night. The chorus of insects is a steady drone, punctuated by the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, howler monkeys, owls, and the occasional haunting growl of a jaguar. Their voices remind me that I am never truly alone, that the wild and the sacred intertwine like roots beneath the earth. The jaguars in my dream are more than beasts. They are symbols of power and destruction, guardians of the threshold between worlds. They remind me that fire, like life, is unpredictable, destructive, but necessary, a force that can cleanse and consume. I close my eyes again, willing the image of the jaguars to return. I see their sleek bodies moving silently through the flames, their muscles rippling with strength and purpose. Their eyes hold the wisdom of the ancients, a warning that the balance between creation and destruction is fragile. I remember the sacrifices made on this very altar, the blood spilled, the chants that filled the air, the smoke rising like prayers to the sky. I am the keeper of these memories, the guardian of fire and flame. It is my duty to maintain the sacred balance, to ensure the sun rises and the jungle thrives. But sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, doubt creeps in like a shadow. I wonder if the fire inside me burns too fiercely, if the jaguars in my dreams are omens of a reckoning yet to come. The temple feels alive tonight, the stone humming with energy, the coals pulsing with a silent promise. I pour libations of water and maize onto the fire, watching as steam rises, hissing and twisting. Into the air like spirits freed from the earth, I whisper prayers to the gods, Tezcatlipoca, the jaguar lord, Huitzilopochtli, the fire god, and Zyptotec, the flayed one, begging for protection, for strength, for guidance. Each word is a thread, weaving through the night, binding me to the past and future, to the sacred and the profane. Outside, the first light of dawn begins to bleed into the sky, turning the darkness to shades of crimson and gold, the same fiery hues that dance in my dreams. The jaguars fade with the night, but their presence lingers, a quiet roar in the back of my mind. I rise from the hearth, the warmth still lingering on my skin, and prepare for the day. The temple awaits, its stones whispering secrets, its altars hungry for offerings, and I carry the fire with me, the jaguar's flame, burning bright, fierce, and unyielding, knowing that as long as the coals remain warm, the gods are watching, and the world still turns. The lightning of the rain god, Tlaloc. Year 1487, Tenochtitlan. I fast for 7 days beneath the relentless sun, my body a vessel of sacrifice and supplication. 7 suns have risen and set since I last tasted food or water. The hunger gnaws at my belly, a cruel reminder of my mortality. My lips are cracked and dry, my muscles ache from the strain of stillness and prayer. But this is the path I have chosen. For to speak with Tlaloc, the rain god, one must be willing to suffer as the earth suffers. Parched, desperate, aching for the life-giving water that only he can bestow. The temple chamber is small and austere, carved from volcanic stone, its walls etched with faded glyphs and images of serpents and clouds heavy with rain. The air is thick with incense, copal, and the resinous smoke of sacred herbs, curling like invisible serpents into the dim light, filtering through a narrow slit in the wall. I sit cross-legged, eyes closed, hands pressed to my knees, every breath a prayer, every heartbeat a drum calling across the void to the divine. Outside, the world carries on oblivious. The city hums with life. Vendors hawk their wares, children run through the plazas, priests chant and beat their drums. But here in this silence, time seems to stretch, a heavy rope pulling me inward, deeper into the void where gods whisper. Feel the weight of the days pressing down. My vision blurs, sweat drips from my brow despite the cool stone beneath me. The hunger is a fire that consumes from within, but I do not waver. My mind walks the fine line between consciousness and dream, navigating the shadowy realm where mortals meet the divine. On the 8th day, dawn breaks in a shroud of heavy clouds. The air is thick, pregnant with promise and tension. My limbs tremble as I rise, muscles stiff and sore, skin pale and clammy. I step outside the chamber into the temple courtyard, the stone steps cool beneath my bare feet. The sky above is a swirling canvas of dark grey and bruised purple, the wind whispering secrets through the leaves of the great ceiba tree that stands sentinel outside my chamber. And then, lightning. A jagged bolt cleaves the sky, a sudden scream of white-hot fury that sears the air and shatters the heavy silence. It strikes the ceiba, igniting the ancient bark in a roaring blaze, sending sparks and embers swirling into the air like fireflies escaping a dying world. I do not flinch. I do not scream. I stand rooted as the flames lick the heavens, the scent of burning wood and earth filling my nostrils. The thunder that follows is a drumbeat of the gods, echoing in my chest, shaking the very bones of the earth beneath my feet. This is the answer. Tlaloc has spoken. The crowd gathers at the temple's base, priests in vibrant feathered cloaks, warriors with jaguar pelts slung over their shoulders, and the people of Tenochtitlan, eyes wide with awe and fear. They whisper in hushed tones, watching as the fire consumes the saber, the sacred tree that links earth and sky, life and death. I feel the weight of their gaze, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What will the rain god grant us? Will the drought end? Will the maize fields drink deeply once more? Will the rivers swell and the lakes brim with the water of life? The fire burns low, the night deepens, but I remain by the charred tree, a sentinel of faith and fear. I taste the ash, on my lips bitter and sharp, a reminder of the sacrifice that was made. I feel the rain begin, first a whisper on my skin, then a roar, a cleansing downpour that washes away the dust, the hunger, the waiting. I close my eyes and listen. The rain, a symphony on stone and leaf, a hymn to the gods that echoes in my soul. In this moment I am both mortal and divine, the messenger of Tlaloc's will, the bearer of his mercy. The fast was not just hunger. It was a passage through the fire, a walk through the storm to touch the face of the sacred, and as the rain falls, I know the earth will live again. The drums of dawn. Year 1487, the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan, Aztec Empire. The drums begin before the sun rises, a low, thunderous pulse that shakes the earth beneath my feet. The sound is ancient, primal, each beat a heartbeat, steady and relentless. It fills the cool pre-dawn air, echoing through the stone corridors of the temple, reverberating against the walls, painted with the blood-red stories of gods and warriors. The rhythm swells, growing louder, deeper, as if the very heart of the world itself beats through those stretched animal skins, struck by hands calloused and fierce. Every beat draws me closer to the knife. I stand in the shadow of the temples. Great steps, barefoot on the cold volcanic stone, my hands bound but my mind wide open. The smell of smoke and copal incense coils around me, thick and sweet, weaving with the scent of damp earth and human sweat. Around me, the priests move with grim purpose, their faces painted in streaks of white and black, eyes burning with devotion and dread. The crowd is gathered below, thousands of voices murmuring in a growing tide of tension, punctuated by the sharp crack of drums. Mothers clutch children, warriors tighten grips on obsidian-tipped spears, elders whisper prayers to gods who will not answer. I am the offering today, the chosen one, the sacrifice. I have known this moment since I was a child, the moment when the thin thread between life and death would snap, and I would cross into legend or oblivion, a bridge between mortals and the divine. I try to steady my breath, to calm the storm raging inside me. But the drums, they are a summons I cannot resist. Each beat a thunderous command, each heartbeat a step closer to the edge. My thoughts flicker to my family, the faces of my mother and father, their eyes shining with sorrow and pride, the taste of maize and chili in my mouth, the laughter of friends now distant like shadows. I wonder if they hear the drums too, if they feel the tremor of my heart in theirs. The priests raise their voices in a chant, a litany to Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird, god of war and sun, whose favor we beg to keep the empire strong, the sun rising each day without fail. The chant snakes through the air like smoke, wrapping around me, binding me tighter than these ropes. I see the blade, a gleaming obsidian knife, sharp enough to cut through the very soul. It glints coldly in the flickering torchlight, waiting, patient, merciless. The temple steps seem impossibly high today, as if they stretch into the sky itself. I climb, step by step, the weight of every heartbeat pressing down on me. The drums hammer louder, echoing inside my chest, shaking loose every thought but one. I am not afraid. Or maybe I am. The crowd's murmurs swell into a roar as I reach the altar at the summit. The priests part like waves, revealing the sacred. Stone bathed in crimson light. The sun has not yet risen, but already the horizon bleeds faint hues of red, a promise or a warning. I cannot tell which. The high priest approaches, his face painted in gold and black, eyes like burning coals. His hand grips the obsidian blade, steady as death. His voice is low and commanding, reciting the sacred prayers that call the gods to witness, to accept my offering, to grant their favor in exchange for my blood. The drums slow now, the rhythm stretching, elongating, as if the world itself holds its breath. I close my eyes. I see the sun, a blazing disk on the edge of the world, waiting to rise, to chase away the darkness. The knife descends. A sharp, searing pain blooms across my chest, white-hot and all-consuming. My blood spills onto the stone, warm and wet, soaking into the cracks where centuries of sacrifices have flowed before me. I taste iron and fire and something ancient, the raw pulse of life slipping away. But even as my vision dims, I feel the drums beat on, stronger, triumphant, a thunderous roar that shakes the heavens. The sun breaks the horizon in a flood of gold and fire, and the world lives. The Taste of the Gods. Year 1487, Tenochtitlan, Aztec Empire. The morning air is thick with the scent of earth and maize, sweet and damp after the early rains. The sky above Tenochtitlan is a pale blue, still soft with dawn's first light. But already the city hums with restless anticipation. Today is the day of the great festival, Tlacaxipehulistli, the feast of the flayed men, and all eyes turn toward the gods, hoping for favor and blessings. I stand alone in the quiet courtyard, behind the temple, where the pulque vats bubble softly, their frothy nectar waiting to be tested. The air smells faintly of fermented agave and crushed blossoms, a heady aroma that reminds me of the coming celebration and the power of the divine forces we seek to appease. The pulque is the blood of the gods poured into our vessels, the sacred drink that carries the promise of life or the threat of ruin. My role today is a heavy one. I am the taster, the priest charged with the bitter duty of tasting the pulque before the festival begins. It is no simple task. The gods watch closely, and their judgment will be clear in the flavor. If the drink is sour or spoiled, it is a sign of anger. The harvest will rot in the ground, the fields cursed and barren, the people doomed to hunger. I lift the cup to my lips. The pulque is thick, white and creamy, like liquid moonlight trapped in a vessel. My tongue trembles as I let the first drops touch my tongue, swirling the taste carefully, mindful of every nuance. It is more than a drink. It is a prayer, a message, a test. I close my eyes and focus, seeking the divine whispers hidden within. The bitterness, there is a sharp tang at the back of my throat, a slight sourness that makes my breath catch. But beneath it is the richness of the agave, the sweetness of the earth, and the warm fire of fermentation. The bitterness and sweetness clash and mingle like warriors in battle. I swallow slowly, letting the taste settle deep inside, searching for the god's will. Around me, the sounds of the city grow louder, the chants of the priests preparing the altars, the rhythmic beat of drums echoing from the temple, the excited chatter of the people gathering to witness the festival. But here, in this quiet moment, time slows, and all that exists is the pulque and the fate it carries. The gods are silent. I open my eyes and glance at the sky, where clouds gather in soft wisps. The wind stirs the leaves of the maguey plants nearby, and for a fleeting second, I swear, I hear the faint whisper of a voice carried on the breeze. It is a warning or a blessing. I cannot tell which. The weight of the moment presses down on me. The harvest hangs in the balance, fields of maize, beans, squash, all vulnerable to the gods' favor or wrath. The people depend on this festival, on this ritual, for their survival. If I fail, if I misread the taste, the consequences will be dire. I pour a second cup, tasting again more carefully this time. The bitterness lingers, but it is tempered by the pulque's warmth and the promise of life beneath the surface. It is a delicate balance, like the fragile thread that holds the world together. Slowly, I nod to myself. The gods will accept this offering. The pulque is bitter, but not cursed. The harvest will live. Relief floods through me, mingling with a surge of responsibility. I must tell the high priests. The festival can begin. As I rise, I feel the pulse of the city around me, a living, breathing force of hope and fear and faith. The drums grow louder, the voices higher, and the scent of burning copal fills the air. Today, the gods will smile upon us, and the earth will bear fruit. Whispers of Thunder. Year 1490, Tenochtitlan, Aztec Empire. The sun sinks low behind the jagged silhouette of the temples, casting long shadows over the city of Tenochtitlan. The air is thick with the scent of incense and earth, mingling with the hum of voices and the rhythmic pounding of distant drums. Tonight, the city seems quieter, but a tension coils beneath the surface like a serpent waiting to strike. I sit alone in the inner sanctum of the temple, the walls adorned with jaguar pelts and painted glyphs that tell of gods and warriors, sacrifice and renewal. The flickering torchlight dances across the stone, illuminating the scroll that lies before me on the altar. The scroll, an urgent message brought by a priest from the coast, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. He arrived at dawn, his sandals caked with mud from the marshes, bearing news that chills the marrow. A pale-skinned people have come from across the great waters, men and women whose skin gleams like the moon, strangers unlike any we have seen. They carry thunder in their hands, fire and smoke that tears through the air and shatters the silence. Their weapons burn with flame and roar like the gods of storm and war. The coastal priest's words spill out in broken chants, a fearful warning wrapped in the tongue of distant lands. He speaks of cities built of stone and steel, of creatures mounted on beasts that thunder across the earth, of gods unfamiliar and merciless. I stare at the scroll, the delicate papyrus inscribed with their message. The names of their gods are foreign, unpronounceable curses in the language of strangers. My fingers tremble as I reach out, feeling the weight of the future pressing down upon me. This news cannot spread. It must not stir panic in the hearts of the people. Not yet. Fear is a poison that eats at the soul, and the people must remain strong, unshaken in their faith. The temples must stand unchallenged. The gods must remain revered. Without hesitation, I reach for the flame, an obsidian torch smoldering nearby. The fire leaps to life, casting flickering shadows that seem to dance in mockery. Slowly, I bring the flame to the edge of the scroll, watching as the fibers catch and curl, the letters blackening and cracking. The priest watches silently, his face a mask of dread and resignation. Around us, the city thrums with life unaware of the fate sealed in this small chamber. The scroll burns with a fierce crackle, the smoke rising like a dark omen toward the temple ceiling. The flames consume the message, erasing the words that might shatter our world. I close my eyes and breathe deeply. The gods demand loyalty, silence, and faith. To reveal this terror now would be to unravel the fragile tapestry holding our people together. Outside, the distant howls of jaguars echo through the night, a reminder that the wild still holds power beyond our walls. I gather my robes and step into the corridor, the shadows swallowing me as I move toward the priest's council. They must never know what I have done. The news must remain a secret buried in flame and ash, but the fear lingers in my chest like a wound that will not heal. In the days to come, I will watch the horizon, waiting for the thunder that will surely come. And when it arrives, will we be ready, or will the gods themselves turn away from us, leaving the empire to fall beneath the storm? Tonight, I carry the weight of silence, and in my heart, a prayer for mercy. The Heart. Year 1490, Tenochtitlan, Aztec Empire. The first fingers of dawn scrape the horizon, bleeding pale gold across the obsidian sky. The city is still shrouded in the fragile hush of night's retreat, but within the temple walls, the air is thick with anticipation, heavy with incense and the sharp tang of blood. I stand barefoot on the cold stone floor, my breath visible in the cool morning air that slips through the open temple door. The towering pyramids around us cast long, skeletal shadows that stretch like fingers across the plaza, clutching at the waking city. The sounds of distant drums ripple faintly through the silence, a steady pulse that mirrors the rhythm beating inside me. Before me sits the great chest, carved from dark wood, studded with turquoise and gold, its surface engraved with serpents and jaguars, guardians of the gods. It is heavy with meaning, a vessel for the offering made last night beneath the blood-red moon. The ritual was long, brutal. The sharp edge of the obsidian blade, the chanting priests, the shouts that echoed through the night. I can still hear the final cry of the captive, a sound torn from the throat of a man whose fate was sealed. By divine decree, his heart, still beating, was placed carefully into this chest, wrapped in cloth, dyed with the blood of sacrificial animals, surrounded by precious feathers and jade. The priests assembled silently around me, their faces solemn. Beneath the flickering torchlight, eyes fixed on the chest as if it held the fate of the world itself. To open it now is to hear the gods' verdict, a moment suspended between life and death, hope and despair. With hands steady, despite the storm of emotion inside, I reach forward. The wood is cool, smooth beneath my fingertips. a strange contrast to the warmth I expect to find within. The lid creaks open slowly, as if the chest itself exhales after a long, suffocating night. Inside, the heart lies wrapped in crimson cloth, its surface glistening, the pulse faint but unmistakable. It is still warm. A collective breath is held. The warmth is the sign we all wait for. It means the gods were pleased. The offering was accepted. In that moment, the world seems to hold still, the temple suspended in a sacred silence. The heart's warmth is more than flesh. It is a message, a covenant, sealed by blood and fire. The gods have seen our devotion, and they have granted their favor. Around me, the priests begin their low chants, their voices weaving through the cool air like threads of smoke, rising and falling in reverence. The scent of copal incense intensifies, curling in lazy spirals. Toward the heavens, I can feel the eyes of the gods upon us, their presence palpable in the trembling light of dawn. Outside, the city stirs. Traders and warriors will soon fill the streets, unaware of the sacred rites that have unfolded while they slept. The river glistens like liquid silver, and the maize fields sway gently in the morning breeze. The promise of the harvest, the blessings of the rains, all hinge on this single sign, the warmth of a heart once stolen and now consecrated. But beneath my calm exterior, a dark shadow lingers. Every offering is a gamble, a prayer cast into the void. What if the heart had grown cold? What if the gods had rejected us? The consequences would be unthinkable. Famine, war, chaos. The priests know this all too well, their faces etched. With years of hope and dread, I rise and step back from the chest, the weight of the ritual pressing down on me like a physical force. The responsibility is immense. To be the one who bears witness to the God's will is an honor, yes, but also a burden that gnaws at the soul. The warmth of the heart is a fragile beacon in a world that can so easily be swallowed by darkness. The sun climbs higher, casting brilliant light over the temple stones. I offer a silent prayer of thanks for this day, for the favor granted, for the promise of life renewed. And yet, in the depths of my mind, I know the God's judgment is never final. Tomorrow and every day after, we will stand again at this precipice, offering our devotion and our sacrifices in the hope that the heart will remain warm, that the gods will remain pleased, because without their favor, we are nothing but dust beneath the burning sky. When the sun dies twice. Year 1502, Tenochtitlan, Aztec Empire. The sky darkens at midday. At first it is subtle, a creeping shadow swallowing the sun's golden light, turning the vibrant blue sky into a bruised canvas of deepening twilight. The bustling city of Tenochtitlan pauses, every heartbeat sinking to the slow, inevitable swallowing of the day's brilliance. The market stalls halt, the children freeze mid-laughter, and even the mighty warriors standing guard at the palace lower their eyes unsettled. We know what this means, a solar eclipse. The sun, the great deity Huitzilopochtli himself, is being devoured by darkness, swallowed whole by a shadow that creeps like a living thing across the heavens. It is a sign, a warning, a moment when the world stands on the knife's edge between light and eternal night. The priests gather atop the temple pyramid, their faces painted in fierce reds and blacks, their bodies adorned with feathers and jade, symbols of power and sacrifice. I am among them, the high priest, bearing the weight of the god's will on my shoulders. The air is thick with smoke from burning copal, the resin scent curling into the fading light like a desperate prayer. We prepare the offerings. Twice the blood, twice the lives, twice the devotion. The captive warriors are brought forth, eyes wide with terror but mouths silent. They do not scream, they know their fate. We are to feed the sun with flesh and blood, to strengthen its faltering heart against the darkness that devours it. I take up the obsidian blade, sharp and cold as death itself. My hands are steady, though inside a storm rages. This ritual is heavier than any before it. The sky's unnatural darkening is a cruel omen. Twice the blood may not be enough. The first captive is laid upon the altar, a rough-hewn stone stained with generations of sacrifice. His eyes search mine, desperate for mercy, but there is none to give. I raise the blade high, the polished edge catching the dying light. The cut is clean. The heart is torn from his chest, still beating and held aloft to the darkened sky. Receive this blood, great Huitzilopochtli, I chant, my voice a low, relentless drum against the growing silence. Renew your strength, push back the darkness. We offer again and again, hearts ripped free in ritual precision, blood spilling like rivers over the altar's stone. The crowd below watches in anxious reverence, the tension thick enough to choke on. Mothers clutch their children, warriors grip their spears tighter, even the birds, the messengers of the gods, remain eerily silent. And yet, the eclipse deepens. The sun, once a fierce fire blazing high above, is now a cold black. Whole against the sky, ringed faintly with a corona like a silver crown of death. The city shivers under this unnatural night. Still, the birds refuse to sing. Their silence is a scream in itself, a hollow echo of dread. Birds are the voices of the heavens, carriers of omens and blessings. When they fall silent, it is because even they do not dare disturb the void. I feel the weight of the moment press down, a leaden cloak that threatens to crush the temple and all who dwell within. Twice the blood has not appeased the gods. Twice the sacrifice has not turned the tide. The priests begin their chants anew, voices rising in desperate unison, each syllable a plea, a command, a bargaining with fate itself. The drums beat faster, a frantic heartbeat mirroring the pounding of my own chest. I look up, past the great stone serpent coiled around the temple, past the carved faces of ancestors frozen in stone, and see nothing but darkness. Time fractures. Minutes stretch and shatter, the air thick with tension and the scent of iron and smoke. The crowd below begins to murmur, restless whispers curling like smoke through the temple courtyards. Fear claws at the edges of faith, and then the eclipse reaches its zenith. The world is plunged into a surreal, deep twilight, a silence so profound it robs the breath from lungs. The temperature drops, the city holds its breath. A moment later, a single ray of light pierces the darkness. It is fragile, a golden thread unraveling the night. The birds begin to stir, a timid chirp, then another, until the sky is filled once again with their song, a chorus of life rising from the brink of death. The sun bleeds back its light, flooding the city in warmth and gold. The gods have not abandoned us, but the memory of that darkness lingers, a wound across the sky, a warning etched deep into the hearts of all who witnessed it. I turn from the altar, the obsidian blade still slick with blood, and wonder how many more times the sun must die before it can live again. Because the sky's silence is a threat that hangs heavier than any sacrifice, and when the sun dies twice, the world trembles. The burden of the chosen. Year 1502, Tenochtitlan, Aztec Empire. The sun was just beginning to dip below the jagged silhouette of the temple pyramids when the news arrived. It came on the breath of the wind, whispered by trembling servants and messengers, carried in the heavy silence that had settled over the palace. The high priest, the great intermediary between the gods and our people, had died in his sleep. No signs of struggle, no ominous portents beyond that final, haunting stillness. Just a sudden, profound absence, as if the gods themselves had reached down and claimed him quietly, without warning, without ceremony. The word fell over us like a shroud. I remember the moment I heard it, the way the air seemed to thicken, the sky darkening despite the fading daylight. The murmur of voices hushed, the bustling halls of the temple slowing as the reality settled into every corner. The high priest, was gone. And in that moment, the weight of what was to come pressed down on me with a force I had never known. Was summoned to the chamber where the priests gathered, faces grim, eyes burning with a mix of reverence and fear. They told me the gods had chosen me next, the chosen one. I felt the words hit me like a blow. My hands began to tremble, a sudden, uncontrollable shaking that betrayed the storm within. Fear, doubt, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility tangled in my chest. Could I bear it? Could I become the voice of the gods, the one who speaks their will and carries their wrath? Could I stand beneath the gaze of thousands and not falter? I nodded, because there was no other choice. The path was set. That night the temple was a sanctuary of shadows and flickering candlelight. The walls whispered with the echoes of ancient prayers, the flickering flames casting dancing shapes that seemed to reach out with ghostly fingers. I sat alone in the inner chamber, the weight of the obsidian blade resting beside me like a silent accusation. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, trying to still the trembling in my hands. The gods demanded strength, not weakness. Yet inside, the storm raged. The high priest had been a giant among men, fierce, unwavering, a conduit of divine power. His voice had filled the temple courts like thunder, his presence a shield against chaos. Now, his silence echoed in the empty halls, a void that seemed to swallow the very air. I thought of the rituals, the sacrifices, the blood offerings that had marked every day of his tenure. How many lives had been touched by his will? How many fates had been sealed in his name, and now that mantle was mine. As the first light of dawn crept over the city, I rose to meet my fate. The priests dressed me in the sacred robes, heavy with embroidered symbols of the gods, jaguars, eagles, serpents. The feathers brushed my skin like the breath of the divine, but the weight of the crown settled heavily on my brow. The people gathered below the temple steps, their faces a sea of hope and fear. They looked to the sky, to the stone altars, to the flame that had never been allowed to die. They looked to me. I felt their gaze like 1,000 needles, piercing through every layer of resolve I had forced into being. Could I be their strength? Could I be the link between earth and sky, flesh and spirit? The day passed in a blur of ceremonies, the chanting of prayers older than memory, the careful mixing of sacred paints into the crimson lines I drew across my face. Each stroke was a vow, a plea, a promise to the gods and to the people who depended on me. At midday, I was led to the altar where the high priest had offered his final sacrifice. I knelt, fingers trembling as I touched the cold stone, and whispered the ancient prayers taught to me since childhood. The gods are merciless, I told myself. They demand obedience. They do not suffer weakness. As the sun traced its path across the sky, I began to feel the strange and terrifying weight of their presence, a heat behind my eyes, a pressure on my chest, as if the very air vibrated with power beyond mortal understanding. I tried to speak, to call upon the names of the gods, but my voice faltered. The words were thick in my throat, unfamiliar on my tongue, and then slowly the trembling began to subside. It was as if the gods themselves had reached down, placed their hands upon me, and steadied my heart. That night, as I sat alone once more, I understood the high priest's death was not just an end but a passage. The gods had chosen me, not because I was strong, but because I was human. Because only a man who trembles with doubt and fear can truly carry their will without breaking. Tomorrow I would stand before the city and the heavens and take my place among the gods' servants, and my hands would no longer tremble. Because now I belong to something greater. The Dreamer and the Serpent. Year 1503, Tenochtitlan, Aztec Empire. The day the woman came to the temple, the air was thick with humidity, heavy like a suffocating cloak that pressed down on the city's stone streets and narrow canals. I sat in the sacred chamber, overseeing the morning rites when the whispers began. At first, just murmurs among the servants and guards, something about a woman from the outskirts, a stranger with strange stories. They said she claimed to have seen Quetzalcoatl in a dream. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the god who breathed, wind and wisdom, the bringer of life and death, the one whose image we carved into the highest temple steps, whose sacred presence we invoked in every sacrifice. To see him was to glimpse the divine itself. Yet here, standing before me in the temple courtyard, was not a priest or a scholar, but a woman. Her hair tangled and wild as the jungle vines, her eyes dark and fierce with a spark I could not read. She spoke in a voice both soft and commanding, telling the tale of her vision. In her dream, she said, Quetzalcoatl appeared as a serpent of shining feathers, scales gleaming like the sun's own fire. He spoke to her in riddles and promises, of renewal, of healing, of a time when the gods would walk again among mortals. But it was not the dream alone that caused ripples through our city. It was what followed. The sick began to gather around her, drawn like moths to flame, the crippled, the fevered, the broken-hearted, and when she touched them, bare hands pressed gently to swollen limbs or cold brows or cracked skin, their pain receded. The fever broke, the limp straightened, eyes clouded by sickness cleared, words spread like wildfire. From the poorest hut to the grandest plaza, the desperate sought her. I watched from the temple walls, the silence in my heart growing louder with every miracle. I was the guardian of the gods' order, the interpreter of sacred will. Yet here was a woman untrained, unblessed by any priesthood, wielding power that should have belonged only to the divine or their chosen servants. And I faced a terrible choice: to anoint her as a holy conduit, a vessel for the gods' mercy, or to silence her before her power unraveled the carefully woven balance of our world. The priests debated fiercely. Some saw her as a sign, a blessing sent by Quetzalcoatl himself to guide us through troubled times. Others whispered of heresy, fearing that her power was stolen from darker spirits, that her miracles would invite wrath rather than favor. I carried this weight like a stone in my chest. In the quiet hours of night, I sought the counsel of the gods through incense, prayer, and sacrifice. I fasted, drew blood from my own palm, hoping for a sign, a dream, a whisper. But the gods remained silent. The city buzzed with anticipation and fear. The market square filled with those healed, their smiles wary but grateful. Mothers brought their children, eyes shining with hope. The sick and the broken spoke of a power beyond explanation, and all the while I wrestled with the knowledge that by either blessing or silencing her, I shaped not only her fate, but the fate of Tenochtitlan itself. One afternoon, I followed her, quietly to the edge of the city, where the stone gave way to wild grass and the jungle whispered its secrets. She knelt by a patch of earth and whispered words I could not understand, hands tracing patterns in the soil, as if drawing power from the ground itself. Her face was serene, the fever of her power tempered by a quiet humility. I approached her then, the sun burning hot overhead. "Why do you do this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked up, eyes meeting mine with an intensity that burned through doubt. "I do not know," she said simply. "Only that he told me to heal, that the gods are not distant. They walk among us, in dreams and in flesh." Her words echoed in my mind as we returned to the temple, where the priests awaited my judgment. I could see the faces of the healed in my mind's eye, children who had taken their first steps, mothers freed from pain, elders who could sleep without fevered dreams. Could I deny them this miracle? But what of the order, the rituals, the power carefully guarded for centuries? To anoint her was to change everything, to invite chaos or perhaps a new dawn. That night, I dreamt of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent coiled in flame and shadow. He looked at me with eyes ancient as time and whispered a secret I dared not speak. I awoke with the dawn, the weight of my decision settling over me like a shroud. I would anoint her. Because sometimes the gods speak in ways we cannot understand. Because sometimes power comes wrapped in the unexpected. And because to silence a miracle is to silence the breath of the gods themselves. Veil of Gold. Year 1504, the great city of the Aztec Empire. At dusk, the city breathes a golden sigh, folding itself beneath the setting sun like a great living tapestry woven from stone and life. I descend the temple stairs, each step heavy, beneath the weight of my robes, thick with incense smoke, layered with the centuries of ritual and reverence that cling to every thread. The fragrant haze curls around me like ghosts, whispers of ancestors and gods who once walked this earth. In flesh and fire, the stone beneath my bare feet is warm from the sun's dying light, rough against my skin but familiar, sacred. The scent of copal incense mingles with the faint tang of sweat and earth, weaving into the air like a prayer suspended between heaven and earth. Below, the city of Tenochtitlan unfolds, a glittering labyrinth of canals and causeways, pyramids, and plazas, homes and marketplaces alive with movement and sound. From here, the jagged stone walls and temples catch the last rays of sunlight and glow like molten gold, a crown atop the island city. But they do not see what I see. They do not know how thin the veil truly is, the fragile membrane separating this mortal realm from the realm of the gods. I have stood here many times before, watching the people go about their lives, their faces, flushed with the joy and struggle of existence, unaware that they walk upon the edge of eternity. Below them, the river reflects the sky's blood-orange hues, carrying offerings from the market and whispers from the priests. The scent of roasting. Maize drifts upward, mingling with the sharp metallic tang of blood from the sacrifices performed earlier in the temple. The sound of drums begins to pulse in the distance, slow and steady like a heartbeat, reminding me that life and death are intertwined like the threads of a sacred cloth. I pause halfway down the steps, closing my eyes to listen. The city hums, a living being of thousands, each breath synchronized with the next, a complex dance of lives fleeting and eternal. But the gods move unseen through the streets, their presence a faint shimmer just beyond mortal senses. Tonight, the veil feels thinner than ever. I feel it in my bones, an ancient tremor beneath the earth, a whispered promise and warning tangled in the night air. The air crackles softly with energy, like the charged stillness before a storm. I think of the offerings placed carefully at the altar today, maize, jade, feathers, blood, tokens meant to appease gods hungry for balance, for ritual, for the continuation of the world. The sun will rise again only if the gods are pleased. But what happens when they grow restless, when their hunger deepens? My robes drag as I continue down, the incense smoke curling around me like a protective cloak, shielding me from the darkness pressing just beyond sight. I am the priest, the intermediary, the guardian of the sacred flame. My voice calls to the gods in prayers woven with smoke and song, bridging the worlds for a moment, holding the veil steady. Yet I know the truth, bitter and sharp as obsidian. The veil wavers. Tonight I sense it slipping, thin threads unraveling in the shadows beneath. The golden city, the boundary between the human and divine blurs, and with it comes danger. Below, lanterns flicker to life, their warm light pooling in doorways and casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Children laugh and chase each other along the canals. Mothers call softly for their little ones. Merchants shout their wares one last time before the market closes. They believe themselves safe, shielded by walls and rituals, by gods who govern the sky and earth. But some nights the gods do not rest. I remember the night the sky cracked open like a shattered mirror, and the rain god roared in fury, turning streets to rivers and drowning the screams of the unwary. I remember the fire that danced with a life of its own, consuming a quarter of the city before we could quell the flames with blood and sacrifice. These memories haunt me as I reach the temple courtyard. The stone altar stands bathed in twilight, candles flickering against the encroaching darkness. I approach slowly, hands trembling beneath my heavy sleeves, and offer a silent prayer, not just for the city below, but for the fragile balance holding us all in place. I breathe deeply, the incense thick and sweet in my lungs, and I feel God's listening. I feel their presence brush the hairs on my skin, cold and electric. The veil is thinning, yes, but it has not yet torn. Still, the knowledge settles like a stone in my chest. Tonight, more than ever, the city must not forget the gods who watch and hunger. As the last light fades, the stars begin to pierce the indigo sky, blinking awake like ancient eyes watching over the world. The gods speak in silence, in the flicker of flame and shadow, in the murmur of water beneath the bridges. The city below shines gold in the dying light, unaware, innocent, vulnerable, and I, priest of the ancient rites, stand between them and the great unknown. The veil is thin, and the gods are waiting. The last night of the Silk Road. Year 1504, Talas River, Central Asia. The night was thick with dust and blood. I stood on the cracked earth of the Talas River valley, a long shadow stretching from my falcon-stitched leather armor into the firelight that flickered from the tents behind me. The air was heavy, suffused with the acrid stench of sweat, smouldering wood, and the coppery tang of fresh blood spilled on stone and sand. My hands trembled as I gripped the curved blade of my saber, its edge nicked from days of skirmishes, but still sharp enough to sever tendons and sever lives. Around me, the sound of distant war drums, deep and unyielding, pounded like a monstrous heartbeat in the night. The warriors of the Abbasid Caliphate and the Tang dynasty had clashed endlessly these past weeks, and tonight would decide the fate of empires and the Silk Road itself. I was a scout, once a trader, caught between worlds, between East and West, between silk and steel, between survival and death. My body ached from the dust storms and the endless marches, from the wounds that refused to close. But the real pain was deeper, etched in memory, like the scorch marks on the leather of my boots, like the scars worn by the warriors who had fallen beside me. My comrades' faces haunted my sleep, pale and broken beneath the ghostly moonlight. Tonight, I was tasked with a terrible duty. I had to find the body of my commander, General Gao Xian, and bring it back before dawn, or report his death if I could not. The night air was cold, bitter enough to burn lungs clogged with sand and smoke. I moved silently between tents, eyes sharp for movement, ears straining for the faintest sound beyond the crackling campfires. Shadows flickered, soldiers hunched over weapons, whispering prayers to Buddha or Allah, others staring blankly into the darkness, steeling themselves for the dawn. The camp felt like a city of ghosts, suspended on the razor's edge between life and oblivion. The moon hung low, a pale sickle in the sky, casting a sickly light that revealed the river's shimmering curve, its waters dark and flowing like the pulse of time itself. The Silk Road ran through this valley, a vein of trade and culture that connected worlds, now stained red with blood. I thought of the caravans, mules laden with silk, spices, jade, and gold, traversing these routes before war had turned the land into a graveyard. Ahead, a sudden noise, clatter, a cry, shattered the fragile silence. I ducked behind a tent flap and saw a young soldier, eyes wild with fear, dragging a wounded man across the dirt. My breath caught. The wounded was General Gao, his armor battered, his face pale and streaked with blood, but his eyes fierce and unyielding. "Help me," he whispered, voice cracked like dry earth. "The West, they come in numbers beyond, counting. But we will hold." I seized his arm, steadying him. Around us soldiers scrambled, their faces etched with exhaustion and desperation. "We must move," I said. "The enemy will overrun us before dawn." He nodded, struggling to his feet, but his breath came in ragged gasps. I guided him toward the rear lines where the medics' tent stood, a desperate sanctuary of bandages, herbs, and prayers. The air was thick with screams and the metallic clang of steel on steel, distant echoes of the ongoing battle. I felt the ground tremble as cavalry charged, the enemy pressing hard, relentless as the desert sun. Inside the tent, I laid him gently on a rough cot. The medic, a gaunt man with bloodshot eyes, worked swiftly, his hands stained with grime and the life's essence of many. "We need more time," the medic muttered, glancing toward the sounds outside. "But it is slipping away." Gao's eyes fixed on me, an urgent plea and command buried in their depths. "Find the council," he gasped. "Tell them, no surrender." I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. Outside, the war howled louder. The enemy's lanterns flickered on the horizon, shadows swelling into a tide of steel and fury. I slipped away from the tent, weaving through the chaos. Each step was a prayer for survival, a promise to carry the flame of resistance. Suddenly, the ground erupted beneath me, a volley of arrows raining like death from the sky. I dove to the side, pain flashing through my shoulder as a shaft grazed me, drawing blood. I cursed, rising quickly. The battlefield was a living nightmare, flames licking at tents, men shouting and falling, horses screaming. Through the smoke, I caught sight of the enemy banners, tigers, lions, and crescent moons clashing in the dark. This night the fate of the Silk Road would be decided, not by kings or generals, but by those who bled and died in the dust. I pushed forward, desperate, to reach the council chamber where the surviving leaders had gathered. The room was tense, faces grim and drawn under the flickering torchlight. I told them of Gao's condition, the enemy's strength, the dwindling hope. "Hold the line until reinforcements come," I urged, "for the Silk Road, for our people." The elder leader, eyes sharp as a hawk, nodded slowly. "We fight not just for land, but for the thread that binds east to west," he said. "If we fall, the world fractures." I swallowed hard, the weight of history crushing me. Back outside, the horizon was aflame, fire and shadow merging in a deadly dance. I found a place to stand, sword raised as the enemy surged forward, and in that terrible moment, I understood. The battle was not only for territory, but for the survival of connection, of culture, of a world woven together by trade and trust. I fought with the desperation of a man who knew this might be his last night alive. The screams, the clashing steel, the burning earth, it all blurred into a brutal symphony of war, and as the first light of dawn struggled to break through the smoke, I knew the tide had turned. The Silk Road would never be the same. Echoes of fire and blood. Year 1504, Tenochtitlan, the great temple of the sun. I wake before dawn, before the sky even hints at light. The world is still heavy with night's shadow, but the temple is already alive, alive with smoke, stone, and the whispered prayers of the faithful. I am its Coatl, priest of the sun, guardian of the sacred fires, and keeper of the god's will. My bare feet touch the cold, sweat-slicked stone steps that spiral upward into the heart of Tenochtitlan, where the sun rises first, or so the legends say. The stones beneath me are slick from last night's rain, or perhaps the blood spilled in ritual, still fresh enough to cling to the rough edges. I do not stop to think. My breath is steady, my heart a drumbeat of purpose. The air smells of copal, incense and crushed herbs, bitter and sweet at once. mingling with the coppery tang of blood that stains the altar cloths. The temple is an altar to violence and life intertwined, the eternal cycle of sacrifice and renewal. I enter the inner sanctum where the offerings wait. Jaguar pelts, obsidian knives sharp enough to slice a man's throat in a heartbeat, bowls of maize and cacao, pulque fermenting in earthen jars. Tonight, the city demands a sacrifice, and I will be the instrument of the gods' hunger. Before dawn breaks, I prepare my face with paint. Red from the crushed cochineal beetles, black from obsidian dust ground fine, white from the ash of sacred trees. Each line I draw is more than decoration. It is a prayer and a curse, a shield against the darkness, and a warning to the spirits that their hunger will be met. The first task is the cleansing. I pour cold water from the sacred cistern over my hands and arms, washing away sleep and doubt. The chill burns, but it also sharpens my senses. I whisper to the gods, calling upon Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war god, to give me strength. His fierce hummingbird spirit is near. I feel it in my chest, a pulse like the beat of war drums, echoing through the temple walls. The priests gather silently, their faces painted like mine, their eyes dark pools of reverence and fear. Among us, the chosen captive waits, bound and trembling. He is not to speak. His silence feeds the ritual, his fear a sacrifice before the blade. I hear the distant sounds of the city, merchants waking, children crying, warriors sharpening obsidian blades, but none of it reaches the temple's inner sanctum. Here the air is thick and heavy, filled with the scent of blood and fire. The altar is a block of stone, worn smooth by centuries of offerings. I take the obsidian blade in my hand, its edge gleaming like a shard of midnight. The captives' eyes meet mine, wide, pleading but silent. No prayer, no begging, just a whispered name, a god I dare not utter, for to speak it aloud might summon forces too terrible to control. With the precision of a surgeon and the weight of generations, on my shoulders I begin. The blade cuts the flesh above the chest, warm blood spilling onto the altar, mingling with the incense ash. The captive's breath falters, a low gasp lost beneath the chants of the priests. I reach into the wound, feeling the heart, still beating, still fierce, and lift it high to the blood-red sky now faintly glowing with dawn. The heart pulses. In my palm, like a living sun, the life force we offer so the world may turn, so the crops may grow, so the warriors may triumph. I press the still beating heart onto the stone, and the gods are pleased. The crowd outside the temple roars, their voices a tide of hope and terror. As the sun rises, I am spent but vigilant. The day ahead is long and unforgiving. I oversee the offerings, food, flowers, weapons, each chosen with care, each laden with meaning. I lead the chants that bind the city's spirit to the gods, singing songs older than the stones beneath my feet. Sweat mixes with ash and blood on my skin, a testament to the day's sacred work. By midday, the heat is brutal. The sun is a fiery eye burning overhead, relentless and unyielding. I retreat to the shadowed chambers of the temple, where I fast and meditate, seeking the gods' guidance through visions that blur the lines between pain and ecstasy. The children of the city come to me then, pale, skinny, their eyes wide with fear and wonder. I touch their heads, whisper blessings that bind them to the gods' protection. Some are marked for service, others for sacrifice. I see the flicker of destiny in their eyes, fragile yet fierce. The afternoon is a blur of duties, recording omens in the codices, interpreting the flight of birds, the shape of clouds, the dance of firelight. Each sign can mean fortune or doom. The city listens, and I speak for the gods. As evening falls, the temple fills once more with smoke and shadow. I prepare the final rites of the day. The sacred fires are stoked, the drums begin to beat, low, deep, a heartbeat that carries through stone and flesh alike. Tonight, the city will dream of jaguars walking through fire, of warriors bathed in blood and light. And I will be there, between worlds, between gods and men, a keeper of balance, a servant of fate. The weight of the day presses down, but I do not falter, for I am the priest of the sun, the voice of the gods, the bearer of sacrifice. And until the last ember dies, I will hold the world together, one heartbeat at a time. Blood and Smoke. Year 1504, Tenochtitlan, Temple of the Moon. The first light of dawn creeps cautiously over the jagged horizon, barely touching the highest spires of the Temple of the Moon. I, Yaotl, priest of the sacred night, rise before. The city awakens, slipping silently through stone corridors, steeped in centuries of blood and shadow. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the lingering smoke from last night's fires, a perfume of death and rebirth. My body aches where the ceremonial obsidian blade bit into my palm during yesterday's ritual. A scar I will carry, until the gods say otherwise, a mark of service, pain traded for power. This pain is my constant companion, a reminder that my flesh belongs not to me, but to the gods who demand sacrifice in fire and blood. I begin the day with purification, not just of body, but of spirit. The priest's bath is a basin carved from volcanic rock, filled with water scented with copal and crushed herbs. I immerse myself slowly, feeling the cold shock bite into my skin, washing away the sleep, but not the weight in my chest. Each breath in this city is a prayer and a burden. Tenochtitlan pulses beneath me, a living heart of stone, flesh, and ambition. Its streets already hum with life, merchants hawking cacao and feathers, children chasing the scent of tortillas baking, warriors sharpening their spears for inevitable battle. The city depends on me to keep the gods satisfied, to maintain the delicate balance between order and chaos. I dress in robes dyed with cochineal red and jaguar black, each thread soaked in meaning. The feathers of the quetzal are heavy on my shoulders, the golden sun discs weigh down my chest. I fasted through the night, the hunger sharpening my senses, making me closer to the divine. Or so the elders say. The temple priests gather for the morning council, their faces painted in the vivid blues and whites of the moon and stars. We speak little, our eyes cast toward the sacred codices. Today's readings foretell conflict, omens written in the flight of vultures and the pattern of fireflies. War may be near, death inevitable. My first task is to prepare the sacrificial altar. I crush obsidian shards into powder, mixing them with ash from the sacred ceiba tree. The mixture is dark and coarse, like ground night. I smear it onto the altar's stone with trembling hands, each stroke a plea for protection, each grain a shard of hope. The altar must be pure, a fitting place for the offering the city demands. A young warrior is brought forth, trembling beneath his ornate feathered cloak. His eyes meet mine, wide with fear, but trying to hide it behind bravado. I see his soul, laid bare, raw and vulnerable, a flame flickering in the wind. I speak softly, words meant to comfort or perhaps to deceive. The gods require blood, and I am their instrument. As the sun rises higher, the city swells with anticipation. From the temple's peak, I chant the ancient prayers, my voice a thread weaving through the buzzing streets below. The sound carries far, to the markets, to the barracks, to the homes of those who await my blessing or my curse. The captive's time comes. I hold the obsidian knife high, cold, deadly, sacred. The blade slips through skin and sinew, blood spilling onto the altar like molten fire. The crowd below erupts in a crescendo of cheers and tears, their faith sealed by sacrifice. But the day is far from over. I retreat to the shadowed chambers where the sacred fires burn low. Here I record the day's omens in the codices, intricate. Drawings of gods and monsters, signs and wonders. Each stroke is a prayer, a warning, a guide for those who will come after me. The afternoon brings visitors seeking healing, blessing, judgment. I taste the pulque offered in sacred cups, testing for poison or ill intent. I rub crushed herbs onto wounds, whisper incantations that blur the line between medicine and magic. The sick find hope in my hands, the guilty find fear. As dusk approaches, the temple fills with the scent of burning copal and the low hum of drums. I prepare for the evening rites, the dance of fire and shadow, the final communion with the gods before night swallows the city whole. My body aches anew from fasting and ritual, from pain inflicted and pain endured. Sweat and blood mix on my skin, salt and iron tasting of devotion. I feel the weight of all who look to me. The priests, the warriors, the mothers and children, their hopes, their fears, their lives resting on the fragile thread I hold between earth and sky. Night falls. The city below is a sea of flickering torches and whispered prayers. From my perch atop the temple, I watch the stars blaze cold and distant. I know the gods are watching too, their eyes like shards of obsidian. In the dark, I close my eyes, hearing again the sound of drums beating, a heartbeat calling me deeper into shadow, into fire, into sacrifice. Veins of the earth, the priest's burden. Year 1504, Tenochtitlan, Temple of the Sun. Before the first faint glow of dawn touches the obsidian walls of the Temple of the Sun, I am already awake. My name is Tlalocayotl, the servant of the sacred fire, the interpreter of the god's will. The city sleeps beneath me like a beast wrapped in the cloak of night. But I cannot sleep. The chill of the stone floor seeps into my bones, reminding me that flesh alone is not enough here. Spirit must burn hotter than blood. I rise, the air thick with the scent of copal resin, mingled with the sharp tang of sweat and fear. My hands tremble, not from cold, but from the weight of what today demands. I do not speak this aloud, for to name fear is to invite it in, but beneath the silence, it claws at me. My morning begins with the painting of my face, a meticulous, sacred task. I crush cochineal bugs into a powder so fine it stains my fingertips bright red, like fresh blood. Mixed with ash from the sacred fires and a drop of the pulque fermented deep beneath the temple, I craft the paint that will mark me as the god's chosen. Each brushstroke on my skin is a prayer, a promise of strength, an invocation of the jaguar's stealth, the eagle's vision. The designs snake across my face in sharp, precise lines like veins of the earth, connecting me to the sacred. As the sun edges over the city's pyramid rooftops, the temple begins to hum with life. I join the other priests in the ritual purification. We wash ourselves with water drawn from the sacred spring, cold and clear, sacred and unforgiving. The water washes away the sweat and dust, but cannot wash away the burden. Our robes, heavy with embroidered feathers and woven with gold thread, weigh on us like the god's own gaze. Today is a day of offerings. The air buzzes with anticipation and dread. I help prepare the altar, a massive slab of volcanic stone stained with the blood of countless sacrifices. The scent of burning flesh, mingled with sweet incense, rises like a veil between the mortal and the divine. My fingers, calloused from years of ritual, grind obsidian into dust, mixing it with crushed insects and ash. This dark paste is smeared across the altar, making it sacred and thirsty for sacrifice. A procession approaches. The city's warriors, their bodies painted with jaguar spots and eagle feathers, bring captives from the war's recent campaign. Their faces are proud, their eyes wild with adrenaline and fear. The captives stumble forward, their breaths ragged, eyes wide with terror and disbelief. I meet the gaze of one, A young man whose lips tremble as he tries to remember the gods' names, a chant to save his soul. I see the flicker of hope, fragile and burning. The sacrificial knife is cold in my hand, an extension of the divine will. Its edge gleams like liquid night, and the weight of it is a tangible force. I place my palm on the captive's chest, feeling the frantic beat of his heart. I whisper the prayers taught by my father, his father before him, echoing through the centuries. The gods demand this offering, blood to nourish the sun, flesh to feed the earth. With a swift motion, the blade slices through muscle and bone. The captive's life flows out like a river of fire across the altar. His blood pools, steaming against the cool stone. The crowd below erupts in a mixture of awe and mourning, their chants rising into the sky, a chorus of despair and faith. But the day's ordeal does not end here. The afternoon is consumed by endless duties, tending to the sacred fires, communing with the diviners who read the entrails of animals, and recording the omens in the codices. Each symbol I draw is a fragment of fate, a secret whispered by the gods. The ink is made from crushed bones and plant sap, its blackness deep as a shadow at midnight. As the sun dips toward the horizon, I meet with the city's leaders. Their faces are masks of power and worry. They seek guidance. Will the crops flourish? Will the warriors return victorious? The priest's answers shape destinies. We speak in riddles and omens, for certainty is a luxury forbidden to us. The night is thick and heavy when I finally return to my chamber. My body aches from fasting, from standing in the smoke-filled temple, from the weight of the gods pressing on my soul. I strip the sacred robes and wash the blood and paint from my skin. The mirror, a polished obsidian disc, shows a man both ordinary and eternal. I trace the scars on my arms, souvenirs of ritual bloodletting, and wonder if the gods are listening or if I am simply a servant to silence and shadows. Before sleep claims me, I light a small fire and offer it the last drops of pulque, whispering, a prayer for tomorrow. The gods will demand more, always more. I close my eyes, but the images remain, the flicker of flames, the sharp glint of obsidian, the river of blood, the silent prayers painted on my face. The blood of the sky. Year 1504, Tenochtitlan, the great temple. Before the city awakes, before the market stalls spill their colors and smells into the morning light, I am already kneeling in the shadowed heart of the great temple. My name is Titlalteotl, servant of the stars, messenger between earth and sky. The night is thick with the scent of copal incense, burning slow and steady, its smoke weaving upward like the prayers of the faithful. I sit on the cold stone floor, the chill sinking into my bones. My fingers tremble as I crush cochineal insects with a smooth stone, turning them into bright red dust. The pigment stains my palms, a permanent reminder that I am marked by the gods. Into this dust, I mix ash from last night's fire and fine ground obsidian, sharp as truth. This is the paint I will wear on my face and arms today. Each line is a language of devotion, every smear a sacred symbol, a protective spell, a curse laid upon those who would dare dishonor the gods. The morning ritual begins before the sun dares to rise. We anoint ourselves with this blood-red paint, chanting the prayers passed down through generations. I hear the echo of the temple drums in the distance, the heartbeat of Tenochtitlan itself, calling the city to life and sacrifice. Our first task is to prepare the sacred fires. These are no ordinary flames. They burn with the power of the sun, god Huitzilopochtli, a fire that must never be allowed to falter. I gather dry copal resin and kindle the flames, watching them flare alive, orange tongues licking the blackened stones. I whisper prayers into the fire, begging the gods to keep the sun rising, to keep the rivers flowing, to keep the warriors strong. By mid-morning, the temple fills with the sounds of footsteps and whispered incantations. The captives for sacrifice have been brought from distant battles. their bodies bound in intricate knots, their faces painted with the colors of their tribes. Some scream, some weep silently, others stare blankly, accepting their fate. Their blood is the lifeblood of the city, the currency of the gods, the price for another day beneath the sky. I stand at the altar, a vast slab of volcanic stone stained dark from centuries of offerings. The priests around me prepare the sacrificial. Knives, their edges honed razor-sharp from obsidian. The air smells of sweat, blood, and incense. The sun climbs higher, and I feel its burning gaze like a weight upon my skin. The moment comes with brutal clarity. I lay my hand on a young warrior's chest, feeling the frantic flutter of his heart beneath my palm. His eyes meet mine, wild, desperate, searching for mercy that will not come. I chant the prayers, calling down the gods to accept this offering. The knife flashes, slicing through flesh and bone, severing the connection between this world and the next. The blood spills, out hot and vivid against the stone. It pools and runs, a dark river carrying life back to the gods. The crowd's cries rise in a chorus of mourning and celebration, a sound that will haunt me in my dreams. The rest of the day is a relentless cycle of duties, tending the fires, interpreting omens, guiding the faithful who come seeking healing or prophecy. I listen to the whispers of the wind, read the patterns of birds in flight, watch the entrails of sacrificed animals for signs of favor or wrath. Each symbol is a thread in the vast tapestry of fate, and I am tasked with weaving it into guidance for the city's rulers. As twilight approaches, I join the priests in a ritual dance, bodies swaying and feet pounding in time with the drums. We move like shadows, our painted faces gleaming in the firelight, our voices rising in song to the gods. The night air is thick with sweat and devotion. Finally, when the city is silent and the stars wheel overhead, I return to my chamber. I strip the paint from my skin, but the weight of the day remains etched in my bones. I sit before a small obsidian mirror and trace the lines still visible on my face. These marks are my identity, my burden, my sacrifice. Tomorrow will bring fire, blood and prayer once more. Veins of fire. Year 1506, Tenochtitlan, the temple of Huitzilopochtli. Before the sun dares to light the skies of Tenochtitlan, I am awake, drenched in sweat beneath the thick embroidered robes of the priesthood. My name is Yaotl, warrior, though I have never drawn a blade in battle. Instead, my fight is against the unseen forces, the hunger of the gods, the wrath of the ancestors, the thin, trembling thread that keeps the world from unraveling into chaos. The air is thick with the scent of earth and smoke. Even now, the city sleeps beneath a quilt of mist, and I slip through shadowed halls in the heart of the great temple. My bare feet touch cold stone, worn smooth by generations of sacrifices and prayers. Each step is a ritual, a slow passage between life and death. I enter the chamber where the sacred obsidian knives are kept. Their edges glint like shards of night, sharper than any warrior's sword. I pick one up, feeling the weight of history. In the handle, the promise of blood on its blade. The gods demand sacrifice, and I am their instrument. The priests and acolytes gather in the inner sanctum, faces painted in the vivid reds and blacks that mark our order. We crush dried cochineal, insects between our fingers, mixing their blood-red dust with the ash of last night's fires and the oily sap of the copal tree. This mixture becomes the paint that adorns our skin, a mask of divine purpose, a shield against death's shadow. Outside, the city begins to stir. The marketplace hums with merchants shouting prices, mothers coaxing children awake, warriors sharpening weapons for battles yet to come. But here, within these walls, time slows. The air thrums with anticipation and dread. The captives arrive, limp, terrified, stripped of dignity. They are not enemies but offerings, chosen by fate, and conquest to feed the gods' insatiable thirst. I trace a line of obsidian dust across my forehead, then draw a spiral around my eyes, a symbol of renewal and death intertwined. Today, a young woman is brought before the altar. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, search mine for mercy. But mercy is a lie we cannot afford. I place my hands on her chest, feeling the frantic hammer of her heart beneath my palm. The world narrows to this moment. The sharp glint of the blade, the scent of copper-heavy blood, the muted gasp as life slips away. Her blood spills across the altar, warm and bright as dawn. It runs in thin rivulets, soaking into the carved stone, a lifeblood that fuels the sun, the rain, the crops. Around me the priests chant, their voices rising in a tidal wave of sound, a plea, a promise, a curse. The sun climbs higher, burning away the mist, casting long shadows that dance, like spectres on temple walls. I wash the blood from my hands, but the stain remains, invisible yet eternal. There is no cleansing from what we have done. The afternoon is a haze of ritual. The reading of omens in the flight of birds, the interpretation of dreams sent by the gods, the careful tending of sacred fires that must never die. Each moment is weighted with meaning, every breath a prayer. Hungry children come seeking healing. I touch their foreheads with ash and paint, whisper words learned from the old scrolls. Some heal, others do not. Each failure is a dagger in my soul, a reminder that even the gods are not merciful. As dusk falls, the drums begin again. Their deep resonant beat calls the city to gather, to witness, to remember. The blood of sacrifice is not just for the gods, it is for the people, the earth, the endless cycle of life and death. Tonight, I will paint my face once more, this time with the ashes of the sacred fire. Each line is a vow, to protect, to serve, to carry the weight of sacrifice. I am bound to the gods by blood and flame. When the city finally sleeps beneath a blanket of stars, I remain awake, watching the flickering flames, listening to the whispers of those who have passed. Beyond, tomorrow will come, and with it the endless tide of sacrifice and prayer. Whispers of blood and shadow. Year 1506, Tenochtitlan, the great temple of Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli. Before the dawn, before the city stirs beneath a sky still thick with stars, I rise. I am one of the few chosen to walk the narrow path, between this world and the realm of gods and ancestors. Each day is a labyrinth of ritual, blood, and silence. The air is cool and damp when I step onto the stone terraces of the great temple. Mist clings to the city like a fragile veil, the smoke from countless fires weaving between towering pyramids. My breath hangs like smoke in the cold morning as I enter the inner sanctum, a space alive with whispers, shadows, and the faint metallic scent of obsidian. The first ritual begins with the lighting of the sacred fires. The flame must never falter. It is said that the god's power flows through these fires, a thread that stitches the fabric of the universe together. My fingers tremble as I touch the embers, feeling their heat pulse like a heartbeat. I whisper prayers, ancient words passed down through generations, a language of power and fear. As the sun edges closer to the horizon, the temple comes alive. Priests and acolytes move like ghosts through labyrinthine corridors, faces painted with red, black, and white symbols of war, death, and rebirth. The scent of copal incense thickens the air, filling every crevice with a heady perfume that clings to skin and bone. Today my role is to prepare the offerings, bodies and goods, bound for the gods' insatiable hunger. I crush dried insects, the red dust staining my palms, mix them with ash and the bitter sap of the maguey plant to create the sacred paint. Each stroke I paint on my face is a prayer, a plea, a curse. The patterns are intricate, each symbol a key to the divine. A procession forms outside, moving slowly toward the altar. Captives, chosen in battle or tribute, wear the heavy chains of fate. Their eyes are wide with terror, searching for mercy in a world where mercy does not exist. I meet the gaze of a young man, no older than my brother, his body trembling. I see his fear and wonder if the gods can feel it too. The ceremony begins with the pounding of drums, low and relentless like a war drum calling warriors to battle. The high priest chants in a voice that shakes the very stones, summoning the gods to witness the sacrifice. My heart pounds in time with the drums, a violent rhythm that echoes in my chest. I step forward with the obsidian knife, its edge sharp. As death itself, the skin beneath my fingers is warm, alive, and soon it will bleed for the gods. The moment stretches, a fragile thread of time between life and oblivion. The first cut draws crimson, bright and shimmering, and the captive's cry pierces the air like a broken arrow. Blood spills over the altar, thick and sacred, pooling into the carved grooves that tell the story of the sun's journey through the underworld. The gods drink deeply, their thirst eternal. Around me the priests raise their voices in song and prayer, a cacophony of devotion and despair. After the sacrifice I cleanse myself with water from the sacred springs, but the stains remain invisible, eternal. The city outside bustles unaware of the darkness that keeps their sun alive. Mothers cradle their children, merchants barter, warriors prepare for battle, and I carry the weight of blood and fire in my soul. The afternoon passes in a blur of divinations and prayers. I study the flight of birds, the patterns in maize kernels, the shape of clouds, every sign a message from the gods. The omens are not always kind. Today the feathers fall jagged and broken, and my heart tightens with unease. Evening descends like a shadow, and the temple is bathed in torchlight. I lead the final ceremony, an offering of pulque, the sacred drink fermented from agave. I taste it carefully, searching for bitterness. If the gods find it sour, the harvest will fail, and famine will stalk the land. Tonight, I dream of fire and jaguars, fierce and burning creatures stalking the edges of the world. When I awake, the coals in the hearth still glow faintly, a promise that the gods are watching. This is my life, a ceaseless cycle of blood and shadow. Each day I walk the razor's edge between worlds, carrying the weight of sacrifice so the sun may rise again. Thanks so much for listening to this story from the perspective of an Aztec priest. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for more immersive history stories told in first person. Let me know in the comments which time period or event you'd like to hear next. Until then, take care and I'll see you in the next video.